أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. From today onwards, we are going to focus on SPSS. Now, before starting SPSS, let's discuss a few very basic things that are particularly important when we start to use SPSS. Now, let's assume that we have never used SPSS. So, we are going to do these sessions or classes with a focus that we have never used SPSS, but we have collected the data. Now let's assume this is the questionnaire on which we collected data. So a normal questionnaire would look like this. So a normal questionnaire will have maybe a few instructions on the top, followed by respondents' personal characteristics like gender, age, education, job tenure, type of company he or she works for. Followed by, you will have statements. Now these statements will be related to a particular construct or variable. Now in terms of data analysis, this particular construct or variable is unobserved, latent variable. And this is observed or measured using multiple indicators. These indicators are normally referred to as items or statements. Now each statement is then coded or given a code that is called item code. Now how do you use this item code? We are going to talk about this as well. Again, this is another construct behaving ethically. And these are the items that actually measure that particular variable. Same goes for all the variables in this study. So there are more or less 7 or 8 different variables in the study, and each of them is measured using 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 indicators. Now let's assume you've collected the data. You've got the data maybe in Excel, or maybe in hard form, or maybe through some online software like Google Forms, or maybe Qualtrics, or maybe SurveyMonkey, or any other. So how are you going to import or use that particular data that you may have in soft form or hard form into SPSS? The first thing that you need to do is, let's open SPSS. So after that you have installed SPSS, just click this window button here, type in SPSS and you select IBM SPSS Statistics 26. In this case this is 26, maybe you have other versions. Click open. So once it opens, it looks like this. Now in this case we are not going to open any existing file, rather we are going to have a new data set. So we click new data set, or rather we double click it, and this is our new data set. Now it looks like this when you open it, it's all empty. Now there are two views in SPSS data editor. One is variable view and the other is data view. Now in the data view you will see all your data. In this case it's empty because we haven't defined or entered any data. The other is variable view. So the first thing that you need to do is you have to define your variables. After that you are going to enter your data. So how do you define your variables? Now you need to first understand what are your variables. Gender here is a variable, age is a variable, education is a variable, job tenure is a variable. These here are also variables. Why? Because each one of them can have different varying values. And the perception pertinent to this particular statement may change from person to person. So how do we define these variables in SPSS? So we go to SPSS and we make sure that we have selected the variable view. It will be highlighted in orange or yellow. So first we have to put in the name of the variable. In this case the first variable is gender. Now since it's SPSS, which is Statistical Package for Social Sciences, What we do is we enter our data in the form of numbers. Now these numbers may have a certain amount of numerical strength, or they might not have any numerical strength. For example, they may be on nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio scale. Now in this case, when we will enter gender, we will represent gender by a number. Although we can enter male or female as well by selecting string, but numbers are always preferred. So width is the size of the data. Normally 8 characters is fine. Decimal points, can gender have decimal points? No, so it's better to have 0. What's the label? Now sometimes the name of variable is a code. So we do not understand what this variable name means. So we have to label the variable. In this case, we do not need to add any label. However, when we are defining a variable for, let's say, this particular indicator, in this case we will use label because the name of the variable will be maybe 81 and we do not know what 81 is. So in order to explain what 81 means, we have to label it, and in the label then we will add this whole description. We'll do that in a while. Values. So your variable gender can have different values. In this case, gender will have 1 or 2. So how do you define the probable values? What you need to do is you need to click here. In the value we will write 1 and we will label it as male. So whenever 1 is entered, it represents male. Next, click add. 2, it represents female. Add. Press OK, and now the values are defined. Are there any missing values? And how do we represent or show missing values? In this case, let's say we do not have any missing values, or although there are any missing values, we will leave the cell empty. Otherwise, you can have representation for the missing values in the form of numbers like -999. But for now, let's leave it empty. Columns, it represents the width of the column. For example, sometimes we have variables that have data in the form of string or large numbers. So we need a bigger column size. For example, let's say if I change this here to 18, now look at the column size here. So in order to change the column size, there are two ways. You can extend the column size like this, or otherwise you can change the column size here. How do you want your data to be aligned? Left, right or center? I normally leave it default. Measure, is it nominal scale variable, ordinal scale variable, interval or ratio scale variable? Now in this case, in SPSS, interval and ratio is represented as scale, whereas nominal and ordinal are kept separate. Now what's the reason that nominal and ordinal are kept separate and interval and ratio scale are merged as scale? Because the measure of central tendency for nominal is mode, for ordinal it's median, for scale the measure of central tendency, or for interval and ratio the measure of central tendency is mean. Now since the average for interval and ratio, or the measure of average for interval and ratio is mean, that's why in SPSS we represent it as scale. So what's the role of this variable? This variable will be entered into the data. There are other properties or other roles as well, but for now we are going to use input. Now next, let's define age. Now in this case, what I've done is I've kept age as open-ended, so we can categorize it later. So I'm going to look into it later. Similarly, you can do for education and job tenure. Let's do it for this one as well. So I kept education as open as well, so we can later categorize it, and tenure. So now you have described or defined your demographic variables. The next step is we have to define these indicators. Now these indicators for which variable? This authentic leadership behavior. So how do you do this? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables here. So how do I do this? Let's go back here. How many I've got? 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. What does this 81, 82, 83, 84 and 85 means? So what I need to do is I need to label it. How do I label it? I just copy my questions from here and I select the label or columns and paste it here. Now look at this. All questions there. Now what does 81 means? 81 means this. 82 means this. 83 means this. 84 means this. 85 means this. All done? Similarly, you can create all your variables. Next step, let's assume we have entered all the variables. So the next step is to enter the data. Now before you enter the data, let's assume you've got your data in front of you in hard form. So before you are entering the data, the first step is to mark your questionnaire. Number your questionnaires. Now why do I need to number my questionnaire? The reason that I want to, or the reason that I should number my questionnaire is that what if I enter the data, or what if I enter incorrect data, or maybe I have made a mistake in the data. So the next time when I'm checking my data and I find out that okay, yes, I found that okay, there is a mistake in my data. So how do I correct it? What's the original value? So you have to go back to that particular questionnaire. So number it while you are entering it. In this case, I'm entering the first questionnaire. So on the top right, left, bottom right, bottom left, I will write 1. So let's say I've got the questionnaire 1 in my hand. The gender is male, so I'll write 1. The age is 27. Education is, let's say, 18 years education. Tenure is 3 years. And for authentic leadership behavior, there are 5 options, and let's say for the question number 1, this particular respondent has selected 3. For question 2, the particular respondent selected 4. For question 3, he selected 4. For question 4, let's say he selected 5, and similarly for question 5, he selected 5. Now let's say I've entered the whole questionnaire here. So I put that questionnaire aside. Now let me get another one. So I mark it as 2. So once I mark it as 2, now this questionnaire is filled by a female. So I'll write 2. The age is, let's say, 21. Education is 18 years. Tenure is, let's say, 3 years. So that particular female for 81 actually marked strongly disagree for question number 1 or statement 1. So strongly disagree is represented by 1. Disagree for question number 2 or statement number 2 or indicator number 2. And similarly for the rest of them, it was neutral. So 3, 3, 3. Similarly, you will add all your questionnaires or all the questionnaire that have been filled by different subjects for your study. Now once this is done, so let's see how will it look. So it will look something like this. Here is your data. Age, gender, experience, and all the data for all the indicators. So once you have entered all the data, and these are the variables, although I haven't labeled it. So once you have entered all the data, what's the first step that you need to perform? The first step is to make sure that you have entered your data correctly. Now each variable, since it's a variable, will have a proper range, a minimum value that it can accept, a maximum value that it can accept. So what are the minimum and maximum values a variable can accept? You should obviously know that this is the minimum value a variable will accept and this is the maximum value a variable will accept. So how do you check that, okay, yes, I have entered the data in a correct manner or there are no mistakes in your data? So how do we check the minimum and maximum value, or how do we check if there is a mistake in the data? So what we need to do is we need to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and frequencies. Next step, what we can do is we can either add all of these variables directly and check them, or we can add some of them and do it stepwise. Now both of them are particularly fine. Let's select a few of them. Press arrow key and they will be added here. Next step, click statistics and make sure that you select minimum and maximum options from dispersion. Press continue and press OK. Now look here, you've got gender, experience and all the variables that you selected. And look at the minimum and maximum value to specify if you entered the data correctly or not. Now if we look here at the gender, the issue is it was meant to be either male or female. Now how come we've got a third category here? Now there must be a mistake in the data and we need to correct this mistake. So in order to correct a particular mistake in the data, you have to first locate that particular mistake. Now how do you locate your mistake? But before that, just go through your questionnaire. Okay, there is a mistake, 3. So there is one mistake. Look at experience. Well, this looks fine. Look at 81. Yes, the minimum value is 1, the maximum is 5, because yes, we have a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. All else looks fine. The problem is with gender. So where is this problem? So what we need to do is we need to go back to the data. There are 2 ways to do it. First, select gender, right click on it and you can sort it ascending or descending. Now in this case, let's sort it descending. Look at this one here. There is this data that is problematic. But the problem with sorting your data is then you cannot go to the original questionnaire because now you have changed the order. So do not do sorting when you are looking for correction or correcting the mistakes in the data. Let's go back to the original one, edit, undo. Now look at this. Make sure that you are not changing the order if you are correcting mistakes. Now in this case, you cannot revert back to the original shape of the data. So what you need to do is, again, you need to close your data set. Make sure you do not save the changes. Now you have to reopen that particular data file. How do you do this? Maybe you can go to the source of the data. Here it is. Let's open it. Now that the file is open, we can see that, okay, here is the issue. Now in order to solve this issue, I need to go back to my hard questionnaires or questionnaires in the hard form and take out the questionnaire that was numbered 1. Now if I take out that questionnaire and I have a look at that questionnaire, that 3 was actually 2. That wasn't 3, it was 2. So now I have made the correction. Similarly, you can make correction for all the other variables. But how do I locate this 3? Now in this case, it was easy because the 3 was right here at the top. Now what if that incorrect value was somewhere here or somewhere here maybe? Let's say this is 297 is actually 3. So how do you locate this 3 value in this particular variable? You can't see it with your naked eye. Rather, even if you keep scrolling through the data, it's difficult to locate that particular number, which is a mistake. So how do you locate that mistake? So where is this mistake, or where was that mistake? That mistake was in the variable gender. So what you need to do is you need to go to edit and you need to find that particular number which is a mistake. So I go to edit, click find, and what was the number that was numbered, or so rather entered incorrectly? So what was that number that we entered incorrectly? That was number 3. So what I do is I click find next, and here is the mistake. So I have to take out that questionnaire number 297, and when I take out that questionnaire, the number is not 3, it's rather 2. So I can press it or press that particular cell and enter the number there, and then just need to close it, and now the correction has been made. So this is how you can correct your data. Now what if there is an error or there is a mistake in data entry for something like a continuous variable maybe, or something, or a variable that is numerical in nature like this. So the preferred way is go to analyze, go to descriptive statistics and take out the descriptive, the mean value. So you know that the means are not really high and the means are not really low. For example, you have taken the data on, let's say, the salary of the people working in let's say working in households or maybe small firms. Let's say you enter the data into SPSS or any other software, and when you take out the mean, you find out that okay, the average income is around, let's say, $1,000. So no one working in a small household will get $1,000 salary a month maybe. So there is a mistake in the data. So how did you find that mistake? Through taking out the mean. So now you need to find out, okay, where was that mistake made? So for example, let's say we add 81 here. Go to options, make sure you select your minimum and maximum, continue, okay. Now here the mean is fine. It's within the range. So there is no mistake made. But still, make sure that you check your mean values for minimum and maximum, because sometimes what happens is, let's assume, let's go back here and let's make a mistake, and even though you take out the mean, you won't figure out that mistake that easily. Let's make a mistake, 55. Why is it important to make sure that you check your data for errors? This is why it's important. Let's say 81 is 55. Mistakenly I've entered 55. Now look at the mean value. Look at this, 3.49. It looks normal. 3.49 is a normal mean value for a particular mean or average of the 5-point Likert scale. But if I do not check the mean earlier, the minimum and maximum value earlier, I won't figure out that there is a mistake. Now I know there is a mistake. If I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have figured out that there is a mistake. Now that we know that, okay, how do you locate mistakes? How do you find mistakes in your data? The next step that we perform is, or the first step whenever we are doing our data analysis, is that we write our descriptive statistics or demographic profile of our respondents. Now in this case, we've got these demographic variables. Now how do you take the descriptive statistics or demographic profile of the respondents and how do you report it? Let's say I'm interested in reporting now each of these variables. If it's a thesis, what you can do is you can report each variable separately. Now if it's a research paper, normally we write a paragraph and we describe our sample at hand. So for example, let's take out the descriptives for gender and see how we can report it. Go to analyze. Now gender is a categorical variable. It's not a continuous variable. So when you've got a categorical variable, we take out frequencies. So we want to know the frequency of occurring for each of the value in that particular variable. How frequent was 1? How frequent was 2? Where 1 is male and 2 is female. So we click frequencies and we are interested in gender. Now there is one other thing that we normally see in thesis. When we are writing our thesis, we see charts. Now in this case, since there are only 2 categories, so we are good to use pie chart. Now when we've got more than, like, say 5-6 categories, it's always recommended do not use pie charts then, because they are like not clear enough. So let's say for now we will use pie charts and we want to display frequencies. Press continue, press OK. Now look here, this is your table and this is your graph. Now first let's copy the table, Control C or right click and copy. Let's go to Word format. Let's write gender, paste the table here. And how do you write about the gender? Respondents in the study were asked to mark the gender 260, that is 73.9% respondents were male, while 92, that is 26.1% respondents were female. Respondents' distribution by gender is presented in table 1. Alright. So how do you format this table? First, select this or select whole table or complete table. Go here and select all borders. Now we first need to remove this. So you select it and press backspace. We do not need this. So what we need to do is we need to go to layout, draw table, and click here, or select or make this as a column. Now obviously now you need to move this so that this becomes one single column. Now select this column, press backspace, this column is now removed. We normally do not need to report valid percentage or cumulative percentage. So you can delete that as well. Now right click, autofit to window. What you need to do is right click here, autofit to window. Now make sure that this frequency or the columns, the second column and onwards they are aligned as center. So you need to center your content on the page. So center your content on the page. Now in APA style, we do not have all borders. So you select this border option here. First remove all the borders, then select bottom border, again select top border, then select the first row and select bottom border. Now the reader won't know what is 1 and 2. So what you do is instead of 1 you write male, and instead of 2 you write female, and here you can write your gender. Now this is your variable. Now obviously there is one more mistake. You need to add the caption for your table. So this is table 1, distribution of gender. Again you can have your pie chart as well. Just select this, press copy, and you can paste it here. Obviously just shorten it a bit, bring it center of the page, get it on the center of the page. Again, figure 1, gender distribution of respondents. Again, figure 1, and with the table you have to put your description in italics, or you can write figure 1 shows the gender distribution. That's it. So this is how you can report your data for a particular demographic variable. Obviously make sure that the font size is, the font face is unanimous or same throughout your text. Now moving on, similarly you can do this for all your other variables like experience. In thesis what we do is we normally put or we add the frequencies for all our other variables as well. But in case of a research paper, we do not have to add, or rather we do not add the frequencies for each of the indicators because we do not have much space. So once you have reported your descriptive statistics like this in a thesis or in a paper, the next step is that we do our inferential statistics, whereby we may do correlation, regression, or any other type of test for our study.